Well, my consideration is the children. I think they are the ones who are effectively going to suffer most. And it's not because of, I mean, there's always a price to pay for progress. You fix something, but unless you are particularly careful, you cause another problem.
Have been told that your fatigue is normal, that your medications are necessary, and that your food is healthy. But what if some of that or all of that is a lie? Well, John O'Reilly is here to argue that modern food, medicine, and environmental toxins are quietly eroding our health. We're here to talk about it on Pat Mesede's best-selling author podcast. We're here by we're here with and by Stories of Strength co-author John O'Reilly, and we're here to talk about our health, the environment, food, fatigue, taking the best care of ourselves possible, and so much more. So, Mr. John, great to see you. How are you?
Well, indeed, thank you for asking.
We're glad to hear it. And is there anything you think I left out of that introduction? What should we know about you?
Uh, Not a lot, really. I have practiced medicine for, I suppose, 50 odd years. Um, I suppose an interesting tale in how I actually came to do medicine, because when I graduated from high school, the in the only well, one had to have a standard to go to university, but the only particular thing was that you had to have a certain standard in mathematics. So I thought I might go and do engineering. So, but when I got to the uni on the sign up day, all the guys in my year were doing medicine. So I thought I'd tag along. My parents were very surprised when I told them I was doing medicine.
And so you just it was a random life chance and it led you here. And so what have you discovered? What's your message? And one thing I'm really curious about too is like what's before we even get to that, what's the disclaimer? Because whenever we talk about medicine or health, I'm always worried about putting something on YouTube or getting shut down. So when you teach what you teach, do you usually say some kind of disclaimer or a caveat to your advice?
Well, my experience in teaching is only limited to fellow medical practitioners of whom I'm training to do anesthesia. So I have very little experience in dealing with what one would loosely describe as the public.
Okay, fair enough. So we're just here to just share some opinions, right? You're not a doctor, it's not medical advice, just here to share some opinions. And what is your stance? What do you think is wrong with the world? What should we pay close attention to?
Well, I think we should give an attribute to the advances that have been made over the last 100 or so years, particularly in sanitation and health in general, food supply in particular. So, what used to be the commonest cause of death years ago, particularly in children, but also in adults, um, but children especially, if a child were born the likelihood of them surviving was not what you might call 100%. Today, it is almost 100%. Um, and you could have the stories, I mean, people of having 10 or 15 kids, only five or six of whom survived to be an age, because nutrition as well as infection was the prime cause of death. Since then, as I said, medicine has advanced greatly, but it was preceded by sanitation and public health. Medicine's contribution primarily was in the minimization of the effects of serious disease like smallpox and all the rest of it. And a large part of that was vaccinations. Now, the main difference today, I think, is the quality of the nutrition, whereas back in the day, um, there were large varieties of the same crop. You could have a farm 100 miles away, which would have a different breed of, um, wrong term perhaps, but of oats or barley or even potatoes. I mean, certainly when the Aztecs, to my best of my knowledge, grew potatoes, they had different strains for the levels at which above sea level they were growing them. So stuff that was high up was quite different from stuff that was quite low down. Um, The problem with mono societies that depend mainly on a particular item, aside, for example, the Irish potato famine, the main cause of death in that was the potatoes got a blight, which turned them to mush, basically. And that was the staple diet of most of the people in Ireland. Consequently, about 1 million died and about 2 or 3 million fled the country. But it shows the disadvantages of having a mono, um, um, for want of a better term, culture in food. Now, today we have an abundance of food, but one could argue that the quality of the food or the inherent quality of the food is less than it used to be because of A, the lack of diversity, and B, the lack of minerals and other constituents of the food. So today you have children who look very healthy. A lot of them are quite fat, which is another reason you could say is because their lifestyle has changed. They no longer go out and play. They sit in front of cameras, and schools are designed to, so they're sitting most of the day. But the hidden thing that nobody really talks about very much is the hidden radiation that exists everywhere. So, for example, we're sitting here watching a thing that device is radiating us. Our television, our telephone is radiating us wherever we go. Um, and you can't see it and you can't feel it. The problem with little kids is that they are extraordinarily susceptible because don't forget, they're not just mini adults. They are an organism which is developing. So if you hold, just for example, if you hold a telephone to an infant's ear at birth, the radiation goes almost all the way through to the other side from your telephone. Now, these telephones, they have repeater towers all over the place. You go to a supermarket, you're bombarded with radiation. You sit in front of the telly, you're radiated. Even your lights, the LEDs, they radiate. So consequently, you have these little kids who've had no experience of this being um, um, irradiated by something that is almost certainly not in their best interest. I'm not saying that we should castigate developments. I'm merely saying development should be considered with all ramifications because what you don't know that you don't know is the stuff that, as the expression goes, bites you in the arse. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot to take in, and it's good to be educated. And so you're talking a lot about personal choices and awareness. And you're reminding me, I don't know how true of a story it is, but they said that like the Black Death, right? Black Plague, if
Yeah.
only they had known about hand washing, it would have made such a difference, just that one simple practice. And so like now we have, you say this, we have this abundance of food, technology, information, but we need to be careful about what we eat, what we do, what radiation we allow to get into us. And do you think there might be a starting point? Like, was there a time when you started to make some changes in your life, or like, what could we do about this?
Well, the main thing I think you have to actually be aware. Um, what you don't know that you don't know is, as I've said before, and most people have no concept. They imagine because things um, have looked the same. I mean, for example, pasta. Um, there, I live in Australia. I'm sure you know. Well, there were family pasta, mostly Italian, set up pasta making sheets. And over years, well, the last lot I remember, but 20 odd years ago, I think they all got bought over by multinationals. Now,
Mm.
the main function of multinationals is to look after the bottom line. And without necessarily wishing to point fingers or castigating them for their viewpoint, I'm trying to say that the quality of the product they are selling is to a large degree, or should to a large degree, be monitored by government bodies. So, in other words, to have a multinational that has different standards for America, Europe, and Australia, to me, is a complete dereliction of duty by the government. The standard should be to the highest standard, not a variable standard depending on the rules of the country to which in which you live. Now, the other thing I'd want to belabor the point, it's the lack of awareness is what gets everybody. I mean, I cannot stress too often, if you don't know something, you can't do anything about it. But the adulteration of food today is staggering. I mean, you have, for example, there are um, um, enhancers, take crisps and chips and those sorts of things without wishing to name any names. A lot of them have dyes and things involved in the flavoring process. And they have that MSG and they have, oh, there's a whole list of them. And if you look at the average crisps and chips and things that kids love, yeah, they can't get enough of them. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking little kids. I mean, well, older kids, of course, are addicted to Coca-Cola and the fast drinks and all that lot, which are seriously high in sugar. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people think that things, because they sound healthy, are healthy. Muesli bars, for example, classic. You'd imagine a muesli bar should be, oats and maybe we say currants or something, or fruit. But in point of fact, a lot of them have been adulterated with things like corn syrup and palm oil and gosh knows what else. And, you buy a convenience. Convenience is a major problem today because you get shredded cheese as a classic example. You can buy packets of shredded cheese. I don't know if you've ever shredded cheese, but under normal
Yeah.
circumstances, you get a block and you shred. Now,
Right.
you cannot put that together in a bag without it clumping. And yet, none of the stuff that you buy from the bags clumps. And of course, the reason it doesn't is because the stuff is coated with a non-clumping um, um, surface layer, which
Mm.
is not necessarily a great thing for your health. Yeah,
So
there are examples.
So it's scary, and I think a common thread of what you're saying is greed, right? Is that these big companies buy up the smaller ones, and then they say, "Well, we'll make more money if we just stick to this one crop. We'll make more money if we add the sugar in here, or if we add the food dye here, and it'll taste better." And they don't care about health; they just care about, well, can we make our food more addictive, or make it more popular, or make more money? And so it's scary, and it seems like it's just like a ever evolving threat, right? There's always some new technique, or oh, now I didn't know that shredded cheese was bad. Now I didn't know that the granola was bad. It seems like it's just they're always innovating, so we need to keep up, don't we?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, the other thing people don't appreciate, I think, to a large degree, is genetically modified organisms, which are a real bonanza for the companies that make them because the farmers have to buy the stuff every year. So in the good old days, you actually got the stuff that you had and you kept some of it for the following year. Whereas today, if you subscribe to GMO, you have to rebuy the seeds every year because they don't reproduce. The other thing, of course, is that the biodiversity, insofar as a lot of the pesticides and farming policies have been very deleterious to the bee population. And bees are, you might say it's nice, cuddly honeybees, and they make all the rest, but they play an enormous part in pollination of everything, not just fruit, veg, but everything. If all of the bees vanish tomorrow, and my understanding is there's a serious shortage in America
Right.
because there's a huge export industry from Australia, queen bees being shipped, to my understanding. So it just goes on and on. I mean, I, but I mean, I don't know if you can necessarily say greed. I suppose ultimately it is, but companies are there to make money. The bigger the company, the more they make. Now, what I find fascinating, apropos of the medical side of things, is how you can have a company that has been fined billions of dollars and still allowed to exist. The transgressions to allow such penalties should be sufficiently severe to make that company defunct.
Yeah.
But that's only my view. I mean, well, I wouldn't presume to push it down anybody's gullet unless they're stuck listening to me at a podcast.
Right. And if they're here, they want to be educated. They want to know what's going on. So as far as like doing something differently, I mean, are you someone that would suggest maybe like stay away from the crisps or the fast food if possible, to like look into like the a local farm, or grow your own vegetables, or like what do you think are some logical steps?
Well, all of what you have said, I think, is it would be a regional thing. But the most important thing is you need to know about it.
Hmm.
And most people don't. They presume that the stuff in the supermarket is perfectly acceptable, and they usually buy on price. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with major corporations, the milk quality, for instance, is not the same um, from the best to the worst, because there are brands of milk which are singularly better than others. But once you get the major corporation, it comes down to the base price, which is the base standard. Unfortunately, this is determined by governmental control. And if the government has no particular interest in controlling what people are eating, then people just blindly accept whatever's there. It's the science of shopping, for example. It's known if you walk into a supermarket, natural tendencies turn left. Now, quite why it should exist, I don't know, but they allegedly studied it and found that, I mean, this is my understanding. So then they have a ranking. So the I rank is the one they're pushing, the top and the bottom. People aren't going to be looking, but price is mostly it. So somebody will pay, something is $3, and if they can get it for $2, they jump in without ever bothering to look at where it's come from or the ingredients. For example, one thing I can tell you is that a lot of stores, major stores, for example, nuts, you can find um, nuts, and you look at the packet, and it says, for example, made from 10% Australian product, which means 90% of it comes from overseas. Now, coming from overseas is all very fine, but you've no idea the quality of what they are doing overseas. Um, and quite why they should be importing 80%. Now, you go along another bit, you'll find exactly the same thing. We'll say almonds. And this is 100% Australia. I'm just citing from Australia point of view. But if people look at it, they just look at it and say almonds, smoked or whatever, and that's it. They don't ever look to packet because they're being conditioned to accept the fact that a brand that has been around forever is of value. It's the same for biscuits. You know, a household brand of biscuit, which I'm not going to bother naming, would be an automatic gimme because it's been there forever. The problem is it has been taken over but therefore been afflicted by all of the vagaries of being taken over. So I can rant on for this forever. I mean,
But what I get from that is that there are just many factors that we should pay attention to, right? Like, and there's our tendency to just say, okay, well, I'll just get what's at eye level. I'll just get what's the cheapest. And you say, well, maybe look at the back of it. And I know in America, maybe just 10, 15 years ago, they finally like standardized the back of all the nutrition information and the calories. So now I can quickly like look at, and like my eye focus like knows what numbers and what to look at, so I can kind of, it's less mentally taxing to look at all those things. And we need to pay attention to it because our health is so important. I know that you're big on all this, right? There's this environmental factors, and if we can notice what kind of food we put in our bodies, it can do wonders for perhaps our fatigue or our anxiety. And we've jumped around all kinds of different topics, but in these final minutes of our conversation, I want to make sure we talk about what is important to you. So, do you think there might be a missing question in our conversation that I should ask you, I just don't know to ask you?
Well, my consideration is uh, the children. I think they are the ones who are effectively going to suffer most. Um, and it's not because of, I mean, there's always a price to pay for progress. Um, you fix something, but unless you are particularly careful, you cause another problem. Now, unless people are, I hesitate to use the word paranoid, but unless they're sufficiently interested in uh, poking beyond the surface, they're never going to change anything. And as I said, to me, the things like electromagnetic radiation didn't exist. Well, it did. I mean, the sun and the earth and things gave a background amount, but the amount of um, electromagnetic radiation bombarding infants these days is well, I hate to use the word unprecedented, but um, it's new, and the body does not adapt in a timely fashion to new things. It takes adaptation. But so mostly we need to develop a setup where the children are protected. But you can only do that if people know about it, number one, and if governments actually do something about it, because people have been conditioned over the years to believe what the government says, as being correct. And all you've got to do is look at the carry on with this COVID rubbish. Uh, that was a class act in brainwashing, in my humble view. And people accept what the government says because they have an inherent belief, for some extraordinary reason, that the government are there to help them.
And maybe it's not so. And so, but I like your idea of like a little bit of paranoia, maybe, right? Like healthy paranoia, mild paranoia, just to question what we allow to have around us and what we allow to put into our bodies. So if someone is interested, fascinated about this, there's the book that you're in, storiesofstrengthbook.com, but there's also your website, which is depletednutrition.com. So when someone goes to depletednutrition.com, what will they find there?
Very little, I'm afraid. Primarily because I'm new at all this business, and I'm sort of for want of a better term, um, taking advice from people who know a hell of a lot more than I do about the setting up of such things, yourself included. Um, so at the moment, it's a work in progress.
But once it is set up, what will be there?
Oh, generally speaking, I think it'll just be a rehash of what we've discussed. Nutrition is not what you might imagine it to be. You have to be suspicious about where you get your stuff from. You are much better off getting it from a local farmer who practices traditional farming than you are from a multinational who gives it to you in a bag. Um, um, Growing your own is certainly one of the best ways of doing it. And there are, I mean, even if you live in an apartment building, you can have a hydroponic set up on your balcony, which
Oh.
takes very little effort. The other thing one could do in areas, for example, some people could grow a particular thing and other people could grow a different item and swap them off. Um, a central hive to pollinate the plants of that area would not be an unreasonable thing. And the benefit, of course, is that there is honey for whomsoever wishes to you be in charge of it, which is a valuable item. Um, the stuff you get in supermarkets, you really have to be very suspicious of, unfortunately,
Yes.
because, you know, anyway, I could
And
go
that
on.
is just the world we live in, right? The price of progress. We can't change it, but we can do our little part. And so some of what you describe sounds like a fun hobby, right? The hydroponics or grow your own food or figure out some kind of community networking. That's a great way to socialize and make friends. So there are many upsides to this. And so if you've been listening and you've been interested in more about just taking care of your health, and being slightly suspicious of the mega corporations and giving you this food, and you want to know more, there's depletednutrition.com and storiesofstrengthbook.com. And we've been speaking with Mr. John O'Reilly, who has the chapter in the book called Wellness Gone Wrong: Your Food, Medicine, and Environment Are Quietly Making You Sick, and What You Can Do to Take Back Control, by John O'Reilly. So we'll have those links underneath this episode. And thank you very much, Mr. John O'Reilly. Before I let you go, it's time for the scary part of the show, where I try to put you on the spot by asking about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you. So does anything come to mind as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
Oh gosh, you really put me on the spot. I mean,
Sure it is.
um, I suppose the only interesting thing is how I came to do medicine in the first place, but we've already mentioned that. Um, um, you know, you've got me on the back foot, I'm afraid.
Okay, fair enough. But you've given us a lot of great advice, and I guess the lesson I'm getting from you is just to be a little suspicious, a little paranoid, and just question what you allow to enter your body. So we've been speaking with wellness advocate John O'Reilly. He exposes how our food, medicine, and environment are quietly making us sick and what to do about it. The next step, once the website's online, go to depletednutrition.com. You'll educate yourself, you'll have fun, you'll be glad you did. And thanks, Mr. John O'Reilly, for showing up, stopping by, being a wonderful guest, and telling us what we need to know. So thank you.
Thank you indeed, Robert.